Good afternoon, everybody. It's Dave with Alaskan Homesteading. Today I have a troubleshooting and repair video for you. I picked up this electric snowblower behind me here on Facebook Marketplace for really cheap. It worked fine for a little bit, and then it seems to have, I don't know if it developed an intermittent problem or if it had one and I just didn't pick up on it right away. But basically the way the thing works, if you have to push a button on the side and hold the lever down and it'll start the impeller spinning. Sometimes it just won't start spinning. And I noticed that if I shook it a little bit while it was not spinning, it could get it to start a little bit. So I think there's maybe just a loose connection or something in there. I'm not really sure. But I'm going to do a bit of a teardown on this here and show you my process for troubleshooting and diagnosis. So just to show you how this thing works, it's got a regular plug to plug in for power. And so you just plug into an extension cord. And then you have to hold down this little safety button and press the lever to get it to start. And that's what it sounds like when it's working. It's got a nice little headlight on there so you can see what you're doing in the dark, and it folds down, the little levers here collapse, and it's very compact. It's perfect for a really simple use that I have for it. You may have seen, or may not have seen for that matter, the video where I shoveled off the new slab for my shop. Well, I don't want to shovel that anymore, and I don't want to run my plow on it. So I figured, well, I could just pick up a cheap little electric snowblower and use that to clear the pad the next few times that it snows while I wait for the framing to get done. And so in terms of the symptoms that I'm experiencing, after using it for a little bit, if I press the lever, the headlight will turn on, but the motor won't engage. But if I shake it or bounce it around a little bit, the motor will engage. So I'm going to see if I can figure out what's happening, if there's a loose connection or something else. So in terms of diagnostics, obviously the power comes in here. It goes through this safety switch up here. You have to press the button while you push the lever. That sends power down through this cord into the main assembly down below, and it comes back out through this cord up to the light. So my belief is that because the light comes on, the safety switch is working, but that something else is interrupting the flow of current from this wire to the motor. So I'm going to start by just doing some breakdown on this piece of equipment, take the handle off to get it out of the way, and then I'll have to get into this base plate area and see what the wiring looks like inside there. And if you don't have a little cart for work projects like this, I highly recommend picking one up. It doesn't even matter what kind. They're, you can find them for $50 or whatever. Just something cheap will do. It's just good to have a spot where you can set a piece of equipment or whatever thing you want to work on it. It's got wheels, you can roll it around. Makes it easier to reposition and keeps it up where it's easy to work on. And you can pull it out and work on it from any side. Alrighty. So that's first level of disassembly. Now I had to reorient this. There's more screws on here than you can shake a stick at, and it is going to be a little bit of a laborious teardown. But right now I have a bunch of spare time. Okay. Now inside here we have the main wiring of this contraption. What I think I'm seeing in here, though, I think this might be a little thermal overload protection device. I'm going to have to pull that apart and get a closer look at it. I can't really get the camera in here to show you what I'm doing, but there's a little zip tie holding this bundle of wires together. I just have to disconnect so that I can unfurl the wires and try to make sense of what's in here. least get some understanding of what the circuits are that are inside this. And I do believe that is going to be a thermal overload, but let's get that to where I can unplug it. $15 amp. Yeah, that looks like a little circuit breaker. Huh. Let's pop that off and have a look at it. Because it's entirely possible that this does have a little safety feature in it. And that's not a bad thing. You would think thermal overload wouldn't be the biggest concern with a snowblower, but let's see here. Line and load. I'm not finding anything odd about this. I mean, it's not changing from its, short condition. Okay, well, what I'm going to do here to perform a little bit of a test is I'm going to hook up this overload protection device again, just reconnect it where it's supposed to be, and I am going to just run this motor, and I'm going to clear off my workbench a little bit here, but I'm going to just run the motor, and we'll let it run for a bit and see what happens. See if after 30 seconds or more or whatever, if it decides to stop of its own accord, or if it will continue to operate. Now, keep in mind, this is a little dangerous. You don't want this impeller exposed. You don't want to put your hands in here while this is running. I'm not recommending anybody else do this, but this is just part of my troubleshooting process. So I'm going to plug this back in, and got to get my trigger assembly available. Let's give this a shot. Okay, well that's really loud and annoying, but obviously it didn't stop running. One thing I'm wondering about is whether there could be some lubrication issues. Maybe there's a little too much drag on the axle, and if that could be causing it. I heard some variations in the motor speed while it was sitting here running, so I'm thinking about disassembling the end of this axle to check on that a little bit. All right, 17 millimeter. Let's see how bad these guys want to stay in. Like butter. I didn't expect that to come out so easily. Another 8 millimeter. These things list at 200 bucks at like Home Depot, and I paid 60 for this one. So it's not perfect. Didn't really expect perfection. I did expect it to work more than a few minutes at a time, but here we are. Use a little pick. See if we can convince this thing to come with us. Go on a little vacation. There we go. Pushed it up from the other side. The bearing is okay. It's not the smoothest bearing. A little dab at WD on there. That's definitely better. And maybe there could be some junk making the bearing a little resistive to movement. I gotta clean that up. Well, that definitely is turning more smoothly now after a little shot of WD. You have to imagine the abuse that these things take, being operated in the snow and ran hard and put away wet, as they say. When I did a little bit of reading on these kinds of machines, them shutting themselves down is somewhat common. I mean, that sounds like a pretty cheap plastic drivetrain in there. Again, don't go rooting around inside appliances like this without making sure they're disconnected from power, because you just don't know how well or how safely these things were built or designed, and you don't want to stick your hand into something that could electrocute you. And these things run off 120 volts, right from your wall outlet. So if there was a loose or exposed wire or a damaged wire, you'd be potentially putting your hands just like you were putting them right into an electrical wall outlet. Well, let's turn it over and we can pull the bearing on the other side. This is certainly awkward enough to work on just by nature of its size and shape. Let's take this other side cover off. And there's the drive belt. So we got a little bit of gear reduction. Now this is interesting because I think I see something that could be a culprit. If we look at that, that drive belt is not sitting properly on that drive pulley or on this drive pulley. I wonder if that's gotten off a little bit and is causing additional resistance in the way this thing is supposed to turn. Let's move that back to where it should be riding. Pop that off, take a look, inspect it for any damage. Actually looks to be in good condition. That shaft spins just fine. Ooh, that actually feels very nice. So this is the drive wheel that runs the impeller, and it spins just great with that off of there. How's this gearbox feel? So this little pinion drives right off of the motor, which I can see turning down there. Bring you guys in, you can see a little better. So this drive pinion comes off the motor. You can see those windings down there. Well, let's reinstall this belt properly. Make sure it's aligned on this drive wheel. I gotta keep my finger on there, make sure that stays down. There we go, that'll get it popped on nicely. And then we'll have to press that down so it's riding correctly. Okay, well that's certainly riding correctly on the drive pulleys now. I wonder if that'll run any better with the drive belt sitting correctly on the pulley. Well, let's plug it in and take a listen, see if it sounds any different. I could be fooling myself, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't think it sounded a little faster and louder. I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this for a test. All right, now there's a trick for starting screws in soft plastic that I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but what I'm going to do here is you press down on the head of the screw and you turn it the opposite direction that you want it to go. So if you're trying to screw it in, you want to turn it counterclockwise until the threads on the screw drop in to the start in the plastic assembly. So I'm going to turn this and you can listen. Hear that? When I turned it backwards. And now when you turn that in by hand, it goes nice and easy. It's very smooth. It's very easy to cross thread and totally booger up plastic like this. So it's really a good idea when you're reassembling something of this nature to do it by hand. Yeah, it takes a couple more minutes or whatever, but it's worth it because if you run it down with a screwdriver, a power screwdriver, you're really likely to blow out the threads, and then you'll never put it back together again. Or you'll have to improvise something with a larger screw or pour in some epoxy and tap the screw into that or something. So I don't always follow this advice, but I always give this advice. I guess that makes me a hypocrite, but I know how to be somewhat careful with the power drivers so that I'm not tearing things up. Setting the chuck to a low torque setting is one of the key things there. All right, that side's done. Boy, if this isn't one of the most awkward things that I've ever worked on. I'm just gonna put this all back together. Now that I know how it comes apart, disassembling and reassembling for further testing is kind of a non-event. All right, I'll plug that back in, just do a final function test before we take it back outside. And here we are. It's not working again. That's very interesting. So now we've reproduced the symptom. See, the flashlight comes on, but the motor isn't turning. But if I jostle it, it'll start. All right, I'm going to do something stupid now, and I don't want anybody else to try this. But I've got this piece of PEX, just a piece of plastic tubing. I'm going to reach in here and fiddle with these wires while I've got the manual safety interlock defeated. So I've got the thing here. I'm going to tape the handle so that it stays down. Just use a couple of little loop of electrical tape and leave it so I can tear it off quickly if I have to. And now I'm going to just poke this thing in here. Well, whatever it is, it's got nothing to do with any of these wires. So as soon as I angle it back, it turns on.
1 hour later.
Okay, well, I am back from lunch and I have determined that I don't really understand the problem. And what I think I have to do is tear this down much further and get to the other side where the rest of the wiring is. I think kind of this whole case will have to come apart somehow. So I'm going to just get into that. I'm going to start this really complete tear down at this point, and we'll go from there. All right, well, as you can see, I've gotten this thing more completely torn down. I think I need to investigate some of this wiring that may be behind this little cover that covers up the motor. We'll have to do a little bit more disassembly here. Short screws. There's pretty much see if we can get this little motor cover off. Boy, there's a lot of corrosion in here. Look at all that rust. This thing really has been ran hard and put away wet. That's interesting. The motor has its own little cooling fan. That is dirty in there. I wonder if the brushes are messed up. These contacts on here that hold the brushes in, if those are definitely corroded. So I wonder if I just disassemble that and clean up the contacts, maybe inspect the brushes. Shockingly, it looks like you could replace the brushes in this motor if you really were so inclined. Oh, there it comes. Spring. Actually, the brush isn't in terrible condition. There's plenty of material left. I'm going to say that corrosion, though, on the contact could have a lot to do with it. So I'm going to get some sandpaper and clean that up. But this thing has definitely been really wet inside, and it didn't like it. There's a lot of corrosion. Boy, it runs dirty with those brushes in there. Now we can take the drive belt off again. There we go. Boy, this is starting to seem like a lot of effort for this $60 snowblower. But I guess I want to get my $60 out of it, and I'm not going to get that out of it if I can't operate the thing. There we go. Is this brush like burned out? Or is it, oh, okay. The spring is compressed, and now that's disconnected. How do I get that back on there? That brush spring was really compressed, wasn't really providing any tension. There we go, maybe that'll help. I bet you that's it. Yeah, see, this spring isn't really pushing on the brush, or wasn't when it was in there. So, you know, this contact didn't want to come off like the other side did. So I'm wondering if it was just not pressing against the motor enough. Let's take that brush back off of there. Stretch this spring out some more. So I'm just try and show you a little bit better detail. So this spring was really compressed, and it wasn't pushing on the brush. So that's what we wanted it to be, a little bit just sticking out more, because when I pulled off the little retainer clip, this brush, it just sat there. Like it might not have been making contact with the motor at all. So it could be the case that that was the thing that was loose, and it just couldn't start the motor except if you just jostled it just enough that the brush would make contact. So I'm going to go ahead and reassemble this again, test it again, and see what happens. What do you think? Should I find a more creative place for this? Yeah, I'm not going to put this back on the snowblower. I was really barking up the wrong tree in the beginning of this, thinking that it had something to do with, you know, the assembly binding up, or this belt being messed up, or whatever. It had nothing to do with any of that. All right, gentlemen, maybe we'll have the moment of truth here in a second. Let's see what happens. All right, that is definitely more vigorous, and it of course gave me no trouble starting up in its proper orientation. I bet that brush was the problem, that loose brush. All right, well, isn't that nice? For, I don't know, maybe an hour total of fooling around with this thing, I got it back to working order. Now to finish full reassembly and take it outside for a complete operational test. All right, well, let's give this thing a little test out here. It's just starting to kind of sleet/freezing rain now, so I don't have very long to play with this out here. I'm not going to want to be in this weather very much. But one of the things I wanted to use this for was just clearing snow around my little set of wood totes here that I keep right outside the garage. Let's see what happens. That would be me pulling the plug out of the wall. All right, folks. Well, that's all the time I've got for today. Thanks for sticking with me through this repair video. I think this is kind of a fun thing to do. You know, the $60 for the machine was a great price for a $200 machine. I was a little sad when it immediately started acting up, but you know, I'm really happy that I was able to tear it apart, diagnose the problem, and repair it back to working order. At any rate, if you enjoy this kind of content, go ahead and hit the thumbs up. If you want to see more of it, subscribe. If you've got something you want to say, leave a comment, and we will see you in the next video.